Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the first video in our series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. My plan is to cover every legendary creature from March of the Machine's main set in no particular order, and if there's still interest at the end of that, I might do the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, maybe even the non-face legends from the Mom Commander products. If you have a request for a particular legend or a way you'd like to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you can see, today our commander is Yargle and Multani, the only vanilla legend of the bunch. Building around a vanilla commander is a lot more fun than it sounds, especially one as chonky as ours. But before we get started, let's go over my deck building template so it's clear how and why I build my decks the way I do. I like to build around the commander. I want to be able to not just build a deck I can play the commander format with, but a deck that will show off what's so special about my commander, even one that's just vanilla like this one. So the way I do that is I do about 30 cards that are my game plan. It's what my deck is trying to do, you know how it's going to win. I do another 30 cards that are all support in the form of card advantage, usually like draw, but not always. Acceleration, usually ramp, but not always. And interaction, which is often removal or lockdown pieces. I'll usually do one or two wraths, just board wipes, sweepers, whatever you want to call them. Sometimes more, sometimes I don't do any at all. And I will run 38 lands is my general number, not counting MDFC lands, just so I can make sure I hit all my land drops, because being able to cast your spells is the best part of playing Magic. So, let's talk about Yargle and Multani. Yargle and Multani is an 18/6 Frog Spirit Elemental for 3, 2 black, and a green, with no abilities, just a bunch of funny flavor text. Yargle and Multani is big, and big is what we're here to do. Let's talk about it. Our game plan is combat damage. Combat damage is what we're here to do. Our commander is a big donkey that just wants to swing in and kill our opponents. So we have plenty of spells to pump them up, give them evasion, and protect them. So we can do it over and over and over. Hopefully only 3 times, depending on our opponent total. We have ways of taking advantage of our huge power outside of just combat damage. And while we have defenses in the form of some token creation and some life gain, the best defense is a good offense. So let's be offensive. Here is the core of what we're doing for our game plan. It is pump spells. We want to be able to ramp our way fast into playing Yargle and Multani and then pump them up in order to do that sweet 21 commander damage. So we have lots of different ways of doing that. We will see these spells in different categories as well. But we're going to start with the fact that what they do is they make our big commander even bigger. So starting with Blossoming Defense. Blossoming Defense is an instant for a green. We mostly have instants in terms of our spells, as you can see down here. 24 instants versus 6 sorceries. Blossoming Defense is an instant for a green that gives target creature, generally it's Yargle and Multani, +2/+2 and hexproof until end of turn. So just a simple 2 mana to pump it up and give it hexproof. It's a little bit better than Giant Growth, which I did want to include in this, but as with all my videos, if you go down to the bottom of the Moxfield page and you check out the considering section, there is a wealth of other spells that are good options for this, and Giant Growth is in there. Those spells can be more expensive in terms of price, or less expensive, depending on what you want to do with your deck and which direction you want to take it. So Blossoming Defense, like I say, protects our commander, pumps them up a little bit, gets them just 1 point away from a 1-hit kill. I did want to include one spell that was just going to pump our commander and basically do nothing else, and the funniest one is Embiggen from Unfinity. 1 green to give Yargle and Multani +5/+5 until end of turn. The reason for that is because the creature we target gets +1/+1 for each super type, card type, and subtype it has, as long as it's not a brushwag. So what does that mean? Yargle and Multani has a super type, which is legendary, a type, which is creature, and 3 creature subtypes. So Embiggen gives it a +1/+1 bonus until end of turn for every word in its type line, essentially. If it were at the time of this recording, there's only one 2-word subtype, which is Time Lord, and Yargle Multani isn't the Doctor. So we don't have to worry about that. All we get is +5/+5 for 1 mana, which is pretty great. Is it overkill? 100%, but it doesn't matter. Sometimes we just want to embiggen our big boy. Boys? Yeah. Revitalizing Repast is a 1 mana, black or green hybrid mana spell that puts a 1/1 counter on our creature and gives them indestructible until end of turn. So we have a few instances of putting counters on our creatures, which is a little bit against the plan of bringing our creatures back when they die, or our creature back when it dies. But it still works for us, and its flexibility is hard to ignore. It was going to either be Revitalizing Repast or Snakeskin Veil, which also gives hexproof. But Revitalizing Repast has a slight advantage to it, which is it's an MDFC. We can play it as a tap land. So if we're desperate for mana, which with a 6 mana commander, sometimes we will be, this is a good use of the card to play it as a tap land so we can at least hit our land drops. And if that's not the case, we can protect it, we can pump it. Maybe we've given it +2/+2 and hexproof already from Blossoming Defense, so we just need that 1 more to get it over the mark and kill our opponent with commander damage. Supernatural Stamina is 1 black for an instant that gives target creature +2/+0 until end of turn, and when it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So in a way, this is regeneration. Not exactly, because it's not being removed from combat, but the idea is that it would die, it does die, and then it comes back tapped. So if Yargle and Multani are attacking, which they're going to be, that's what the deck's about, they're going to be tapped anyway once we've attacked with them. So Supernatural Stamina pumps them up by 2, making their power 20, and ensures that if someone wants to remove it or just block it and kill it, it's going to come back, and it's going to come back in the same state it was, which is tapped. This is an effect we've got several different instances of, and this is our cheapest one. The reason we're running Supernatural Stamina is because it's just 1 black. So we can use our mana on a bunch of pumps if we need to, beyond Supernatural Stamina or protections in other ways. Supernatural Stamina plus Blossoming Defense does kill our opponent if they haven't blocked it. And if they have blocked it with something that's big enough to kill Yargle and Multani, which they throw a Colossal Dreadmaw in front of us, sure, we'll die to that, but we'll come right back with Supernatural Stamina, only for 1 mana. In a way, you can look at these kinds of spells as removal spells, because if we don't have Evasion somehow, and so far you haven't seen any spells with Evasion, a scam card like this, cards that bring our creatures right back, is just going to remove whatever blocker or blockers they've put in front of it. If that's a 1/1 token, that's too bad for us. But we've got lots of ways around that as well. Supernatural Stamina is just a good rate for this effect. Tyvar Stand, on the other hand, is even better. It doesn't give anything for more than a green, except Hexproof and Indestructible. Hexproof and Indestructible for just a green with our commander, pretty great. Protects against anything that's not like Farewell or Urza's Ruinous Blast. We'll be able to keep our commander on the battlefield. But if we have extra mana, we can pump directly into it, and Tyvar Stand give us a bigger commander that is hexproof, that is indestructible, and is whatever power and toughness we need it to be in order to not lose it, or in order to make sure our opponent loses the game. So into the 2-drops. Fake Your Own Death is the same thing as Supernatural Stamina. It gives +2/+0 rather, until end of turn, and when this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. But the difference between Supernatural Stamina and Fake Your Own Death is Fake Your Own Death costs 1 more, but refunds it to us immediately. If Yargle and Multani would die, they'll come back and we make a treasure token. So that treasure token it's not permanent ramp, it's not ramp rather, but it is acceleration. It does give us the chance to take this 1 mana that we've spent extra on Fake Your Own Death and keep it and use it on further turns. I like this card a lot. Fungal Fortitude, very similar. It is an enchantment. It's an aura. that costs the same as Fake Your Own Death and does the same as Fake Your Own Death with the exception of the token. But what's important about it is it's an aura with flash. So we can cast it like it's an instant. For 1 and a black, Yargle and Multani get +2/+0, and when they die, they come back to the battlefield tapped. But what's important about this is a persistent effect because it's an aura. We can flash it in just for the pump effect, and maybe Yargle and Multani doesn't die. It doesn't matter that all we got out of it was just the pump, like Fake Your Own Death or Supernatural Stamina. This will stick around. Yargle and Multani's power will remain high, which is relevant for some of our other things, not just the fact that it's a 20, but it also is going to protect them if someone wants to remove them on a different turn or when we're not attacking. It helps. Gaia's Gift is 1 and a green for an instant. Put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control. It gains reach, trample, hexproof, and indestructible until the end of turn. So this completely protects Yargle and Multani, with the exception of course, exile-based sweepers, that kind of thing, or sacrifice effects, edicts. But it gives reach, which is a couple of our spells do. We're not usually going to be blocking with our commander, but sometimes our commander has just been cast. So Summoning Sickness means we might need a blocker. Trample is our best and most common form of evasion. Hexproof and indestructible, of course, protect us. And that 1/1 counter is going to stick around. Sometimes we don't mind that things stick around. Next up is Hunter's Talent. This is a class enchantment from Bloomborough that does so much for us. For 1 and a green, when it first enters, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. With our commander in the battlefield, this is essentially an unconditional kill spell. Of course, our opponent might have some kind of interaction, they might have indestructible, but for 1 and a green, a Rabid Bite that does 18 damage to something, yeah, that thing is gone. Then we can level it up for just 2 more, which would give Yargle and Multani +1/+0 and trample until end of turn whenever it attacks. And finally, we level it up to level 3. At the beginning of our end step, if we still control our commander, we draw a card. Free cards, free trample. This is just an overall good thing. And if we're going to have a lot of time where we have a lot of mana and things we want to spend it on, but maybe it's not time for us to bring back our commander, or maybe someone has somehow managed to remove our commander after combat, and we don't have enough mana to bring it back, but we do have enough to sink into Hunter's Talent. This is a great card. Speaking of flexibility, we have Inscription of Abundance. For 1 and a green, it's an instant with kicker for 2 and a green. It's a modal spell that says choose 1. If it was kicked, choose any number instead. So for 1 and a green, we get any one of these effects, and for 3 and 2 green, we get all of these effects. So we can either pump Yargle and Multani by putting 2 1/1 counters on it. We can give ourselves an amount of life equal to the greatest power among creatures we control, which is going to be Yargle and Multani, or we can have Yargle and Multani fight another creature. So it's a pump spell, it's a Lifegain spell, and it's a kill spell. And if we were to kick this, those happen in order. So we would put 2 counters on our commander, making it a 28. We would gain 20 life, and then it would fight as a 28 another creature. And we can do this all as an instant. Even though this looks like the kind of modal sorcery that we've seen before, Inscription of Abundance, we can attack, be blocked, give Yargle and Multani trample, and then Inscription of Abundance to have it fight whatever the blocker it was. So now it's not just not blocked, it's also not going to have to, we're going to be able to trample over completely and do even more damage. So for example, if our opponent's blocker is a 5/5, normally Yargle and Multani with trample would do 18 damage, 5 of it would kill that creature, and 13 would trample over. If we make it a fight in the meantime though, we can just use that fight effect to kill the blocker, and then trample is going to trample over the entirety of our combat damage, which is all the full 18. So in this case, in this example I'm just making up, Inscription of Abundance is doing an extra 5 commander damage to our opponent. That's not terrible. And if we've got the mana for it, we can kick Inscription of Abundance. We're going to be doing 7 more damage or 7 additional damage to our opponent. We're going to do 2 extra damage to the blocking creature, and we're gaining all this life off of it. And the counters stick around. Inscription of Abundance, again, the flexibility, it's just a big help. Maximum Overdrive. There are a few cards that do something similar to this. I thought that this one was the best option for 1 and a black. 1 and a black for an instant, put a 1/1 creature, 1/1 counter rather, on target creature. It gains Death Touch and Indestructible until end of turn. We have a few ways of giving Death Touch in this deck. It's not that important when we have something so big, but sometimes people hear, ooh, Death Touch? Yeah, I better not block. Or, oh, it has Death Touch? Well, and they think to themselves, I was going to block because I could pump my own creature and maybe trade with Yargle and Multani, but there's no way I can get a trade out of this now. I don't want a 2-for-1 myself. Maybe I just take the damage? Sometimes it works. Overprotect, not only some of the funniest flavor text in our deck after our commander, but just a strong spell. 1 and a green for a target creature you control gets +3/+3, trample, hexproof, and indestructible until end of turn. So it's the same cost as Gaia's Gift. It's not giving reach, and it's not giving a permanent buff, but that buff is enough to put Yargle and Multani's power to the 21 range. So Overprotect, if Yargle and Multani happen not to be blocked, Overprotect is a kill spell, or a you beat your opponent spell. Yeah, it's great. And of course, Blor's defenses are impervious, according to Blor the Impervious, so why wouldn't we want this in our deck? Here's a little bit of a funky choice. I think this is a fun one, though. Of all the options we have that are 1, 2, and 3 mana that can scam our creatures, Presumed Dead from Murders at Karlov Manor is just a lot of fun. For 1 and a black, it's the same effect we've seen a couple of times. Until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0, and gains when this creature dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. But Presumed Dead also suspects that creature. A suspected creature can no longer block and has menace. We're probably not blocking with our commander anyway, but being able to give a persistent form of evasion to our commander, that's just great. It's like putting a trample counter on it, or it's a menace counter, but putting an ability counter on our creature just because it died and came back. So this is sort of punishing our opponent for choosing to have the temerity to block us. I think Presumed Dead is just a fun option in here. Of course, like I've said, if you want to switch these around, there's lots of other pump spells and scam spells in the considering section down below on the Moxfield page. Similarly, Return to Action isn't a huge pump, but it's interesting. For 1 and a black, until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+0, and lifelink, and when it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So it's doing the scam thing that we've seen a couple of different times, but it's giving less of a power bump, but it is giving lifelink. And lifelink is important in this deck. As we'll see a little bit later, we have a number of ways of gaining life, which we want because we're not running a lot of creatures, and our most important creature that we're focusing all our spells on just isn't blocking most of the time. So by bumping up our life total, which is a pretty significant pump up when we have a commander that has 18 power, we're able to withstand our opponents focusing on us with their own combat. So Return to Action is sort of a nod to that. As is, into our 3-drops, Butcher's Glee. Butcher's Glee is 2 and a black for an instant that says target creature gets +3/+0, so that's kill range, and gains lifelink until end of turn, and regenerate it. So what does regenerate mean? I made a reference to it earlier. We have a couple of different things that will act like regeneration in a sense, these scam cards, but what is that regeneration actually doing for us? Well, what it means is it sort of puts a bubble around your creature, a regeneration shield, some people say. It's not a thing that happens when you quote-unquote regenerate it, like this Butcher's Glee card says. It puts this little soap bubble around our commander. And then, when our commander would die, instead, we tap it, remove it from combat, and clear all the damage off of it. And then that's what happens when the bubble pops. It's not exactly like a shield counter, like those of you who may have played in Streets of New Capenna. It's a much older mechanic, and we don't see it that often anymore, but we did see it recently this year in Ether Drift, in a card that we'll see a little later in the deck. But in any case, Butcher's Glee is 3 mana to give our commander the power that they need to kill one of our opponents, give them lifelink, which keeps us alive long enough to hit one of our other opponents, and even protects our commander by putting a regeneration shield on it. We'll talk more about regenerate later, but I think Butcher's Glee is a fun include in this. Similarly, Demonic Embrace. For 1 black, we get an aura. It doesn't have flash, so it's not like Fungal Fortitude, where we'd be able to just play it like an instant, but it's still worth it. 1 black for an aura with enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+1, has flying, and is a demon in addition to its other types. So Yargle and Multani becomes a 21/7 flying demon frog spirit elemental. So I'm not thinking that, obviously you don't need to embiggen it to get the benefit out of having demon as an additional subtype when it's already got 21 power. But maybe they've got blockers. Maybe you have some trample on this as well from something you've put on, like Overprotect. And maybe they're ablating enough damage that is going to matter. But just being able to put a 3 mana enchantment that gives our commander flying and +3 to its power, that's pretty great. In addition, you can cast Demonic Embrace from your graveyard by paying 3 life and discarding a card, in addition to paying its other costs. Maybe at some point you've got enough of these pump spells, and Demonic Embrace is the one you need the most because your opponents don't have any flying blockers or reach blockers. Throw away your card, or maybe you have an extra land that you no longer need because you've ramped so well. Pay 3 life, which you've gotten plenty of from your Lifegain spells, and get Demonic Embrace back and fly back in. Alright, next up is Fully Grown. 2 and a green for target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn, and put a trample counter on it. This is not maybe the greatest rate of a spell in the type that we're going for. After all, Overprotect only costs 1 and a green and gives the same +3/+3 until end of turn, as well as trample, hexproof, and indestructible. Fully Grown costs more, doesn't give hexproof or indestructible, but the trample sticks around. And though we have a bunch of scam cards in this, which do get rid of our counters when we have counters on our commander, the trample counter might do us a lot of good. We might be able to, without having to worry about using our scam cards to scam, we can use them just for pump. Fully Grown pumps the once, lets us trample in, then we can keep trampling in, assuming Yargle and Multani have died, and we don't need to keep them from dying with our scam cards. Having that trample counter is just a powerful thing that we're going to want for our commander. I don't think this is a bad choice in this deck. Same is true for Loxodon and Warhammer. Another great way of us gaining life for 3 mana and an equip of 3. So this is an expensive equipment, but it does give our commander +3/+0, trample, and lifelink. So all of the things we want on our commander, with the exception of protection, for the cost of 3 mana to equip after our 3 mana cost to cast it. And because this is equipment, as opposed to our auras, it can stick around and we can put it back on. 3 mana at sorcery speed to give +3/+0, trample, and lifelink every time we need to put it on our commander. The Warhammer's great. This is one of our cards, Scepter of Celebration, that gives us tokens. For 2 and a green and equip for 3, so similar to Loxodon Warhammer, it gives our commander +2/+0 and trample. That's not that much. But whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. So if we don't kill our opponent, let's say, maybe they block with that 5/5, and we're only able to do 13 damage to it, or rather 15 damage with Scepter of Celebration. We'll do 15 damage to them. That's still 15 commander damage and just 15 combat damage. And then we'll make 15 1/1 creatures that we can use to chump block with all day. Or we can even go wide if we need to. Maybe our opponent just has 4 or 5 really big creatures, and Yargle and Multani are not going to be able to do enough to them. But they've only got 12 life. We swing in with our 15 little friends, and Yargle and Multani. It doesn't matter that they can block our biggest thing, they can't block all of our things. Going wide is a sort of tertiary strategy in this deck, but we have the ability to do it with some of our token generators. I think Staff of Celebration is pretty fun, and it's a card people don't see coming. Goreclaw, on the other hand, Terror of Kalsisma, is 3 and a green for a 4/3 bear that says creatures spells you cost with power 4 or greater cost 2 less to cast. So Goreclaw takes our huge 6-mana commander and makes them into a 4-mana commander. Or if you want to look at it this way, Goreclaw gets rid of one of our commander taxes, one instance of our commander tax. She makes it so Yargle and Multani, if we have them die, they can come back for the same casting cost as the first time, because cost reductions happen after cost increases, which is what the commander tax is. In addition, whenever Goreclaw attacks, each creature you control with power 4 or greater gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. So we do have to risk our Goreclaw in order to get this benefit by attacking with Goreclaw alongside Yargle and Multani. But it doesn't say other creatures you control. So Goreclaw attacks as a 5/4 trample and attacks alongside Yargle and Multani and makes Yargle and Multani a 19/7 trample. I like her. Even if Goreclaw is just there to essentially be a cost reducer, a 4-mana cost reducer that can block, not terrible. Next up, we have Indomitable Might. Indomitable Might is a flash aura for 3 and a green that gives enchanted creature +3/+3, but more importantly, enchanted creature's controller may have it assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. What that means is that some people call this super trample. It means Yargle and Multani, if we flash this in on Yargle and Multani, becomes a 21/9, and it doesn't matter if it's blocked. We can assign its combat damage as though it weren't, meaning we can assign 21 combat damage directly to our opponent's face, irrespective of how many blockers they've put in front of them, and how much power and toughness those blockers have. Indomitable Might, even if Yargle and Multani dies in the process of this, because they'll still take the damage from the blockers, unless you have a removal spell or a counter spell, Indomitable Might wins against someone. It does kill an opponent, because it pushes Yargle and Multani's power to 21, which is the threshold for killing someone with commander damage. This is a 4-mana, you lose the game spell. Pretty great. Leyline Axe is also pretty fun. It's expensive, don't get me wrong. Similar to Loxodon Warhammer and Scepter of Celebration, it costs 3 mana to equip and 4 to cast, but if it's in your opening hand, it's a leyline, so you can begin the game with it on the battlefield. Before anyone takes a turn, you have an axe on the battlefield. It equips for 3 and gives equipped creature +1/+1 and double strike and trample. So not just does Yargle and Multani become a 19/7, it becomes a 19/7 with double strike and trample. So it's doing 38 damage to our opponent, and they can ablate as much of that as they want with blockers, but that's probably enough to kill them. Ruxa, Patient Professor, is just a very good bear. Ruxa is a 4/4 bear druid for 2 and 2 green with 3 great abilities. Whenever Ruxa enters or attacks, return target creature with no abilities from your graveyard to your hand. So maybe Yargle and Multani have died, and we have not been able to scam them back. They're in our graveyard because we've got Ruxa in our hand. We were able to swing in and presumably do some good damage with them. And now, we let them go to our graveyard rather than the command zone. We play Ruxa, and Ruxa is our Eternal Witness. Just brings our commander back to our hand. And of course, when it transfers back to our hand from the graveyard, we could put it in the command zone, but why would we? Put it back in our hand, we've got it. In addition, Ruxa gives creatures we control with no abilities, which is, in this deck, just Yargle and Multani. Actually, it's not. The only card we have is Yargle and Multani. Anyway, it gives these creatures with no abilities +1/+1. That's important because we do have tokens with no abilities. So these citizens become 2/2s while Ruxa's on the battlefield. We have some other tokens that'll do the same. Finally, Ruxa says you may have creatures you control with no abilities assign their combat damage as though they weren't blocked. So that's the same effect as Indomitable Might, but it doesn't just work on Yargle and Multani, it works on all of these citizens. It works on any other tokens we have with no abilities. We attack with our 15 tokens. It doesn't matter if they block, our opponent's going to take 30 damage because it's 15 tokens, all of which have +1/+1 from Ruxa. Ruxa is a great choice in this deck. $7, but a lot of fun. Agonosaur Rex. This is an Ether Drift card. For 3 and 2 green, we get an 8/8 dinosaur with trample, and that's a pretty good blocker. That's a pretty good attacker if we need it to be. But more importantly, Agonosaur has cycling for 2 and a green, and this is why we have it in our deck. It's an instant, since you can cycle at instant speed, that costs 2 and a green, that lets us draw a card, but also when we cycle it, we put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature or vehicle. We're not running any vehicles. And that creature or vehicle gains trample and indestructible until end of turn. So for 1 and a green, we give our commander 2 counters, trample and indestructible. It's even better than this. It doesn't make the trample permanent, but it does give them indestructible as well. And those +2/+2 counters, or +1/+1 counters, stick around. So Agonosaur Rex, we have a bunch of different instances where we can use it to great effect. And again, instant speed, and it draws us a card. Cycling is great. Next up is Overwhelming Stampede. Overwhelming Stampede is an expensive sorcery. I think it's our only sorcery pump spell. Yes, it is. For 3 and 2 green, until end of turn, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. It doesn't just double Yargle and Multani's power. It gives all of our creatures trample and a bonus to power and toughness equal to Yargle and Multani's power. So all of our little tokens, our little 1/1 citizens, if they're just on the battlefield by themselves, they become 19/19 tramplers. Overwhelming Stampede is a great way to kill one player or maybe just win the game, depending on if we have enough creatures out to take advantage of this. Pretty good. Return of the Wild Speaker is a 4 and a green instant that is modal. We choose either to draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-humans we control, or non-humans we control get +3/+3 until end of turn. So if we look at the second mode, that's +3/+3 to Yargle and Multani, which is not that great for 5 mana. But what if we have these 15 little citizens? It doesn't say that they're human citizens. So as long as they're non-humans, which these are, they'll all become 4/4s or 5/5s that have super trample with Ruxa. But more importantly, Return of the Wild Speaker is one of the couple of cards we have in this deck that is a huge draw spell. We can draw 18 cards for 5 mana. 5 mana is a lot, especially when we have so many cheap ones. But that means we're drawing 18 cheap spells, and we're going to be able to, if we have to discard down to hand size, which we likely will, we'll be able to choose the very best 7 from those. So blowing through our library and using up all of the resources we have in it in the most effective way, that's what Return of the Wild Speaker lets us do. Next up is Surrak and Goreclaw. Surrak and Goreclaw, which is another March of the Machine legend, maybe something we'll do a video on. 4 and 2 green for a human bear that is a 6/5 trample and gives all of our other creatures trample. So this is just a persistent source of trample for Yargle and Multani. That also says whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it, it gains haste until end of turn. We have 1 or 2 sources of haste in this deck, and this is one of them. Surrak and Goreclaw makes it so if we've got them out before we get out Yargle and Multani, Yargle and Multani will hit the battlefield, get a +1/+1 counter, becoming a 19/6, and will have haste until end of turn, and has trample for as long as Surrak and Goreclaw's on the battlefield. With that, we've spent 6 mana to play our commander. Our commander is a hasty 19/6 trampler. That means we only need one of our +2/+0 spells to make it lethal, and it just came out of nowhere. Awesome. Finally, we have the Skull Spore Nexus, a 6 and 2 green legendary artifact, but it has a cost reducing effect. It costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So with our commander out, this costs 2 green flat, and it's just great. It does 2 things. We'll look at the last ability first, which is for 2 and tap, double target creature's power until end of turn. That's the pump effect of this. So Yargle and Multani attacks as a 36/6. If we have a way to give it trample, which we have a lot of ways to give it trample, that is probably going to kill someone no matter whether or not they block. But the additional effect of the Skullspore Nexus is whenever 1 or more non-token creatures you control die, create a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness each equal to the total power of those creatures. So let's say we attack with Yargle and Multani, and we use the Skullspore Nexus to pump them up. Yargle and Multani becomes a 36/6. We trample over an enormous amount because we've got some kind of trample effect on them. And even though they have been blocked, let's say, and killed, we're still going to get a 36/36 dinosaur creature token put into the battlefield from the Skullspore Nexus. I want to be clear, that's a very large dinosaur that has no abilities. So Ruxa is going to affect it as well. It'll be a 37/37 that essentially can't be blocked. Or it doesn't matter if it's blocked. Because the Skullspore Nexus cares about the power, the total power of the creatures that died, including the ones that were pumped up by its own ability. What's great about that is we throw Yargle and Multani at our opponent, have it become blocked, double its power, let them die, but before combat damage is done, we throw a scam spell on it, so it comes right back. Skullspore Nexus gives us a huge dinosaur. We still have our commander. If we used something like Presumed Dead, the dinosaur will come back even bigger because, of course, Presumed Dead changes the power. Maybe we hit it with Presumed Dead before we double its power with the Skullspore Nexus. So it would become a 40/40 dinosaur, that the token that's made. And Yargle and Multani, of course, is a 46 creature. We are not here to be clever. We are here to have a big thing do big things. And our cleverness, I guess, is all the little cute spells that we're casting in order to make this all happen. So we've seen all the pump of this deck. Let's see how we actually get it to land with Evasion. So many of these cards, like I mentioned, are doing double duty in the deck, so we've seen a bunch of these already. Let's look at the ones we haven't. Cliffhaven Kitesail is a 1-mana equipment that equips for 2 and gives equipped creature flying. That's all it is. But it has the Snap-on ability, which means whenever it enters, we attach it to a creature we control. So Cliffhaven Kitesail is a sorcery speed. Our commander has permanent flying ability, or permanent flying spell. So if Yargle and Multani dies, this Kitesail falls off, and then it costs us 2 to reattach it and just give it flying. Flying is such an incredible evasive ability, especially for something so huge. We might be able to clear our opponent's skies with this thing. And if they don't have anything in their skies, if they don't have any spiders to stop it with reach, it's not quite game, but it only takes a pump spell or 2 to get this there. We've seen these. Trailblazer's Boots. Trailblazer's Boots are just so strong. They cost 2 for an equipment that also equips for 2, same as Cliffhaven Kitesail. They don't snap on, but they give equipped creature non-basic land walk. So Yargle and Multani would not be able to be blocked as long as our defending player controls at least 1 non-basic land. In Commander, this essentially is unblockable. So why not? It's an inexpensive source of unblockable, both in terms of monetary value and mana. It equips the same as Cliffhaven Kitesail in terms of being 2 mana, and that's just immediate commander damage. We don't even need other evasion like trample or flying because there's not going to be any blocking. It's just great. Next up, we have Garruk's Uprising. I love this card. 2 and a green for an enchantment that says when Garruk's Uprising enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. So if our commander's out, we drop the Uprising, we draw off of it. Immediately cantrips. This enchantment gives all of our creatures trample. So immediate evasion, And whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters under our control, we draw a card. So if we play the Uprising first in those few turns we have before we have enough mana to cast our commander, we're still going to get the card draw off of it once Yargle and Multani lands. This is just great persistent evasion, and it's the kind of card that people generally don't want to spend removal on unless there's not much else threatening on the battlefield. And when we have an 18/6 commander, there's something more threatening on the battlefield, so Garruk's Uprising is going to dodge removal a lot of the time. So we've seen these ones. We've seen all of the rest of these, actually. So that's our evasion. Let's take a look at what we have on our final part of our game plan, and how do we protect our commander. We've seen a lot of these already, I believe, but we have a few new ones. So Blossoming Defense, Revitalizing Repast, Supernatural Stamina, Tyvar Stand. Let's talk about Collective Resistance. Collective Resistance is really a removal spell, and we'll talk about it again in that section. But for 2 and a green, we have an instant that is modal. We can either destroy an artifact, destroy an enchantment, or, relevantly in this section, give one of our creatures hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. But it has Escalate for a green, which means rather than just get one of these effects, we can pay a green and get a second effect, or pay 2 green, so 1 green, 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 for all 3 effects. So it's better than Naturalize just for its removal, and it's a great protection spell as well. We can blow up our opponent's Soul Ring, let's say. We can get rid of their big enchantment that's causing us problems, and we can protect our commander in the process. We've seen these next 3, but we haven't seen Hunter's Bow from the Assassin's Creed set. For 1 and a green, we get an equipment that equips for 1 and gives equipped creature reach and ward 2. So another source of reach and a little bit of protection. But also relevantly, when Hunter's Bow enters the battlefield, it snaps on. Attach it to target creature you control. That creature deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature you don't control. So Hunter's Bow is also a bite spell. It's going to do 18 damage to one of our opponent's creatures, automatically equip to our commander, give our commander ward 2 in the process, and give them reach. Good protection, good removal. We've seen these next several. We haven't, of course, seen the Swifties. Swiftfoot Boots is 2 mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives equipped creature hexproof and haste. It's another source of haste for us, it's another source of hexproof for us, and it equips so cheaply that it's just like we always had a 1 mana spell in our hand that is give your commander persistent hexproof. Not to mention the haste is going to mess people up sometimes. Again, Swiftfoot Boots is sometimes the spell that people have to hit because they can't hit the commander, which means they've got 1 less removal spell in their hand to deal with our better things. That is our game plan cards. We've seen Pump, we've seen Evasion, we've seen Protection. Let's talk a little bit about our support cards before we go into our other tertiary strategies. We'll begin with our card advantage spells. Again, this is card advantage, I just call it draw off as shorthand. So we've seen the draw effect from Hunter's Talon. We've got a Mind Stone here. I love Mind Stone. 2 mana artifact, it taps for colorless. We can pay 1, tap and sack it to draw a card. Helps us with mana early, helps us with card draw later if we need it. It's great. We've seen Garruk's Uprising getting us card draw whenever Yargle and Multani enter, or whenever this enters when Yargle and Multani are already out. But what about a more consistent 2 and a green enchantment for card draw? Colossal Majesty says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. So this is just our Phyrexian Arena. Easier to cast, better for us, we just have to have our commander out, and we will. And if we don't have our commander out, we might have Ruxa out, we might have the Sagonosaur out. Lots of different ways to keep drawing more cards with Colossal Majesty. Honest Rutstein doesn't draw us a card, but it does give us card advantage in the form of a regrowth. For 1, a black and a green, we get a 3/2 human warlock that says, when Honest Rutstein enters, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is another way, much like Ruxa, that we can get Yargle and Multani back from our graveyard and not have to pay commander tax on it. But even if we do have to pay the commander tax, Honest Rutstein also says creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Now that's not terrific in a deck with only 11 creatures, one of which is our commander and one of which is your Honest Rutstein. But it's enough just that it discounts our 6 mana commander. Honest Rutscene, not a bad card, and the regrowth effect for creatures, again, probably we're only going to be able to use that on our commander, much like Ruxa, but still pretty helpful. Now we have Momentous Fall. For 2 and double green, we have an instant that requires us to sacrifice a creature as an additional cost, and we have a few of these that we haven't seen yet in the deck. But sometimes we're not going to be able to protect our commander. Sometimes our commander is likely to die, even if we haven't gotten to do commander damage with them yet, or combat damage with them yet. So we have a few cards in here to take advantage of the fact that a big commander is a big target. So Momentous Fall says, for 2 green, as an additional cost, sacrifice this creature, or sacrifice a creature. You draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then you gain life equal to its toughness. So, similar to the Return of the Wild Speaker, we're drawing an amount of cards equal to Yargle and Multani's power. Maybe it's still only 18, but that's still a lot of cards, and it's going to give us what we need. Plus, it gives us a little bonus of getting an extra, at least 6 life from Yargle and Multani's toughness. Using this at instant speed is really going to flummox our opponents. It's a lot of fun. We've seen these other cards in this section other than the Gitrog, Ravenous Ride. The Gitrog, notably, we will see this become relevant later on when I talk about lands, the Gitrog is a frog. So is Yargle and Multani. Keep that in mind. Regardless, the Gitrog, Ravenous Ride, is a 6/5 frog horror mount for 3, a black and a green. It has trample and haste and saddle 1. So saddle is like crew. They introduced this in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, where this card is from. They brought it back for Ether Drift. What it means is, as a sorcery, or at sorcery speed rather, we can tap a creature with power of at least 1, and now the Gitrog until end of turn becomes saddled. It just gains that status. Here's why that matters. Whenever the Gitrog deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature that's saddled at this turn. If you do, draw X cards, then put X land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. Now, are we going to sacrifice our commander to this other frog so that Yargle and Multani, this huge monstrosity, can ride the Gitrog, and then we draw 18 cards and maybe put up to 18 lands onto the battlefield? Absolutely we are. This is a great situation for us if the Gitrog has the ability to do any combat damage to a player, which, remember, it has trample, so maybe our opponent only has a 4/4 to block with. We can, or even a 4/5. We can attack with the Gitrog after having played Yargle and Multani and used it to saddle the Gitrog, because the creature used to saddle the Gitrog does not have to lack. It can have summoning sickness if we wanted it to. The Gitrog tramples over at least 1 point to the player, to our opponent, and then we sacrifice Yargle and Multani, draw 18 cards, and we can immediately put a bunch of lands from all that we drew onto the battlefield tapped. It might be that we don't have to discard down at all. But even if we do, we've just ramped ourselves so hard that we can replay Yargle and Multani again next turn without having to worry about it. We might even want to do it again. Maybe not. Doing it once is probably enough, but I don't know. In Golgari colors, do you want to draw that many cards? I kind of do. So this is, like you can see, another one of our big draw spells. Gitrog is a good time. Let's see how we can actually play these cards by talking about our acceleration, which again, I just abbreviate into ramp. It's not all ramp. So obviously, Soul Ring, 1 mana, taps for 2. We want this in basically every commander deck. Arcane Signet, almost as desirable. 2 mana, taps for any 1 color in our commander's color identity. We want to be able to make sure that we can cast the Gitrog or cast Yargle and Multani anytime we have them. And as you can note, Yargle and Multani is 2 black pips. And of course a green pip, but so much of our deck is green that we're weighted a little bit more toward green, and we want to be able to make sure that we have enough black to always recast our commander. Arcane Signet is going to do that for us. We've seen Fake Your Own Death. Those who've watched my videos know I like the Signets. 2 mana rock that filters any color of mana into, or any type of mana, into a black and a green. I think that this is better than the Talismans, but I'm running the Talisman of Resistance as well. 2 mana, taps for colorless, or taps for black or green, but you take a damage for it, so it's a pain land on on a rock. I don't think this is a bad choice either, especially when we have so many ways of gaining life, and also we don't really care about our life. We can give it up. We're going to be winning before we take enough damage to matter anyway. So, Elysian Caryatid is a 1 and a green 1/1 plant creature that taps for 1 mana of any color, or 2 mana of any one color, if we have a creature of power 4 or greater. So if we've got Ferocious, this is a 2 mana 1/1 that taps for 2. Great ramp. I like this card. We've talked about the Mind Stone, and now we have Steve, the Sakura Tribe Elder. 1 and a green for a 1/1 that says sacrifice Steve. Search your library for a basic land, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Steve is the reason I went back and forth on it, but I'm not actually running Rampant Growth, because Steve is Rampant Growth as long as he resolves, but he can block first. So slightly more advantageous for us maybe in this deck. Why spend another card to do a sorcery? Now, as you can see, we're running 15 ramp spells, and generally I like to do 10 forms of acceleration, card advantage, and interaction. We're a little higher on some of these this time just because we have a lot of overlap in our cards. But I really tried to force myself to give us plenty of acceleration that's not just cards we're doing other things with, simply because Yargle and Multani is expensive and is likely to draw some heat. So we want to be able to bring them back as much as we can, and ramping helps us do that. Thought Vessel is another 2 mana rock, taps for colorless, gives us no maximum hand size. So we have 2 sources of that, the other of which is Decanter of Endless Water, which is 1 more mana, but taps for colored mana. Otherwise, they're the same card. So whenever we get to cast one of our big draw spells, either of these is going to help us not have to discard down. We have Cultivate, love Cultivate, 2 and a green, search your library for 2 basics, put 1 on the battlefield tapped and 1 in your hand. It helps you hit your land drop next turn. Cultivate's a great spell. We've seen Honest Rutstein, of course, we've seen Gorklaw and the Gitrog, so let's talk about Traverse the Outlands. This is an expensive ramp spell, but notably, it's mana value 5, which is 1 less than our commander. Search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So for 5 mana, if our commander is out, we essentially find all of our basics. In this deck, I believe we're running about 21 basics, so even without the pump, if we haven't played any basics by this time, we're getting almost all of them. We're getting 6/7 of our basics onto the battlefield tapped. That's a crazy ramp. That means we don't have to worry about mana for the rest of the game. Traverse the Outlands it's insane in this deck. It's really fun to watch people look at you and say, how much of your library is going on the battlefield? And then you don't have to worry about commander tax because you can always pay it. Anyway, next up is our removal suite. We've talked about several of these already. Collective Resistance gets rid of artifacts and enchantments. Hunter's Bow is a bite spell. Hunter's Talent is also a bite spell. Infernal Grasp is just a kill spell. 1 and a black for an instant, destroy target creature. You lose 2 life. We're not that worried about our life total anyway. We're going to be gaining plenty of life. Just a straight up good Doomblade for something. Inscription of Abundance is a fight spell. Ramp Through is also a fight spell. Or no, it's also a bite spell. So we'll, for 1 and a green, an instant that has our commander, or whatever creature we want, deal damage equal to its power to target creature we don't control. But most importantly, if that creature has trample, excess damage is dealt to the creature's controller instead. So this is just Rabid Bite, if Yargle and Multani doesn't have trample at the moment. We have a few creatures that have trample on their own, but let's say we've somehow been able to give it trample though. This gives the bite trample, or rather takes advantage of the trample for the bite. So let's go back to that example we had earlier, where we've had Yargle and Multani attack, and there's a 5/5 blocker. Let's say we cast a spell that gives +2/+2 and trample, or rather +3/+3 and trample, might as well, for Overprotect. Throw that on Yargle and Multani. It's now got 21 power, but 5 of it's being ablated. We can ram through and kill another opponent's creature before we kill this creature and trample over so much to its controller. So this is a great way to spread around Yargle and Multani's pumped up power and get rid of creatures in the process. So even at its worst, it's a rabid bite, so it's going to get something out of our way, or maybe we even use, it's not likely people are going to go for this, but maybe we use it politically and say, look, I've got something that can kill their big creature if you want to kill them once it's out of your way. Ram Through is just a useful card. Even though its utility is a little limited in this, because Yargle and Multani doesn't naturally have trample, we have enough sources of it that it's going to come into play sometime. And when it does, it's going to make you feel great. Tear Asunder is just a strong removal card. 1 and a green for exile, target artifact or enchantment, so it's a little bit better than just naturalize. But if it was kicked, exile target non-land permanent instead, and it kicks for 1 and a green. So for 2, a green, and a black, we can exile anything we want that isn't a land. Just a good, useful spell for us. Putrefy is similar. 1, a green, and a black, destroy an artifact or creature, can't be regenerated. I just like Putrefy, I think it's a cool spell. Wind Swift Slice from the Lord of the Ring Commander decks. For 2 and a green, we have an instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Just a bite. But create a number of 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens equal to the amount of excess damage dealt this way. So we're talking about excess damage again. So if we wanted to kill that 5/5 with this, we could have Yargle and Multani do 13 damage to it. The excess damage is 13, so we make 13 1/1 warriors, elf warriors. Again, these are 1/1 creatures that have no abilities. So Ruxa makes them pumped up and makes it so that they can assign their combat damage as though they weren't blocked. This is another token generator, of course. Then finally, we have another modal double-faced card. Fell the Profane. I just really like this card. 2 and double black, destroy target creature or planeswalker. This is our only source of planeswalker hate in this deck, I believe. But it's pretty good. I mean, sometimes you just have to spend 4 mana to kill a thing. And if you're not worried about it, you can always play it as a tapped black source or pay 3 life and it's an untapped black source. Fell the Profane's great. Alright, we have 1 Wrath in this deck from the Warhammer 40k commander decks. Mandate of Abaddon. For 3 and a black, we have a sorcery that says choose target creature you control, destroy all creatures with power less than that creature's power. If you are in a game where you choose Yargle and Multani with this, and it doesn't kill everything else on the battlefield, you've probably got other concerns. This is just a fun card for this. And if you don't think that it's necessary to have a Wrath, like I mentioned, there's plenty of cards in the considering section that will be able to give you other options that you can fill in that Wrath slot with. Now we have a few other cards here, and I've mentioned some of their themes already. Let's talk about our drain spells. We have a few of these that are just a lot of fun. So Rite of Consumption is a 1 and a black sorcery that requires us to sacrifice a creature. So we're sacrificing our commander. Rite of Consumption deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to target player. You gain life equal to the damage dealt that way. So it's a black fling to an opponent, and it has lifelink built into it, essentially. We sacrifice Yargle and Multani for 1 and a black. They'll go back to the command zone, maybe, or maybe we want to put them in the graveyard for the couple of regrowths we have. One of our opponents is going to lose 18 life. We're going to gain 18 life. Pretty good. Essence Harvest is similar, costs 1 more, but it doesn't require us to sacrifice the creature to do it. 2 and a black, target player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. It even works on one of our other creatures, and of course it would, but we don't have to sacrifice anything to make Essence Harvest work. Now both of these only affect target opponent. Jared, Golgari Lichlord, is a creature that lets us do something similar, and it affects everyone. For black, green, we have a 2/2 zombie elf that gets +1/+1 for each creature card in our graveyard. Probably not going to be that many. But for 1, a black and a green, and sacrifice another creature, each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. So it's Rite of Consumption without the life gain, but it affects the whole table other than us. So if we've maybe gotten our opponents down, or we and our opponents have gotten each other down to 18 life or less, we just play Jared and immediately use his ability, because Jared's ability doesn't require, or Gerard's ability, I should say, doesn't require tapping. Sacrifice Yargle and Multani, kill everything. Kill everyone, rather. Finally, Gerard says, sacrifice a swamp and a forest, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. If we have maybe traversed the Outlands and we have all of our basics in play, getting Gerard back may not be a bad thing. Next step, we have Lifegain. We've talked about several of these already. In fact, we've talked about all of these already, except for Tend the Pests. This is another one of our sacrifice cards. Sometimes we just have to throw Yargle and Multani under the bus and get something else out of it. This is also a token card. For a black and a green, we can, as an instant, sacrifice a creature and make a number of pest tokens equal to that creature's power. A pest is a 1/1 black and green creature with the ability, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. So these are our tokens that aren't vanilla. So Ruxa is not going to help them, that sort of thing. But they are a great way for us to have blockers that are going to gain us life rather than lose us life. And having 18 of these little guys, we can attack with a swarm, even without Ruxa and her abilities, or his abilities rather. We can also do the thing I mentioned earlier, where, oh, they've got 3 big blockers. Well, we've got 18 little guys. That's still a lot of damage to our opponent, and whatever they've blocked, we'll gain life from. So, finally, we have the tokens section, and we've seen all of them so far. Tend the Pests we just saw, Scepter of Celebration is Citizens, Windswift Slice makes Elf Warriors, and Skullspore Nexus makes a Fungus Dinosaur every time one of our non-tokens dies. But we haven't talked about Ghoul-Call or Gisa. Ghoul-Call or Gisa is 3 black for a 3/4 human wizard with pay a black, tap her, and sacrifice another creature. Create a number of 2/2 black zombies equal to the sacrifice creature's power. So, similar to Tend the Pest, it makes, if we sacrifice our commander, 18 tokens. But these tokens, like these other 3 kinds of tokens, are vanilla, but they're all 2/2s on their own. So the strength of that is just excellent. We don't have to have our commander die specifically to make it happen, since we're sacrificing it, same as here. We don't have to have it deal combat damage. We don't have to have a target with Windswift Slice. We can do this over and over and over. We make 18 2/2 zombies. I mean, Field of the Dead decks don't need that many to win with it. So we do that, then we bring our commander back out and do it again next turn, and we just overwhelm our opponent with endless value. Plus, if the Skullspore Nexus is out, we'll also make the dinosaur token whenever we sacrifice our commander to any of our sacrifice effects. Seems pretty fun. So, we are almost through this. Let's talk about our lands. This is our mana curve. It is ridiculous because most of our spells are these 2 mana rocks and these 2 mana combat tricks. We've got lots of good options otherwise. We've got a good mix of colors here. A little more than a third black, almost 60% green. So let's look at our lands. We're running 22 basic lands, 12 forests, 10 swamps. You can play with that mixture. I just feel like we need a little bit more green because our deck is so green, but we don't want to cut too much on the swamps because Yargle and Multani, of course, have those 2 black pips. Yeah. So we have a bounce land, which is Golgari Rot Farm, of course. If you watch my videos, you know I think these are great for Commander. They're not as fast as some lands, but even though they bounce something back to your hand, that's a good thing. It makes sure you're going to have a land to play next turn, so it sets you up for the next turn's land drop. We have a checkland, which is Woodland Cemetery, of course. Woodland Cemetery is great because most of the time with our deck, especially since we have so many basics, it's going to come in untapped. So it's just an untapped duel. The times that it doesn't, that's still okay. You could always upgrade this to Deathcap Glade, which is the Golgari colored slow land, which is much less likely in Commander to come in untapped. Now we're running 6 fixing lands. Right now we have Command Tower, of course. You want to run Command Tower in basically any deck. It'll tap for green, it'll tap for black, it comes in tapped. What do you think of that? Path of Ancestry is another Command Tower, except that it comes in tapped. But when we tap it for mana of a color in our commander's color identity, and we use that mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry one. So every time we use Path of Ancestry to cast Yargle and Multani, we'll get a free scry. But not just that, the only creature we have in our deck that shares any creature types with Yargle and Multani is the Gitrog, Ravenous Ride, because the Gitrog is one of our 2 frogs. Yargle and Multani, of course, being the other one. So, Path of Ancestry, that's what I was telling you to remember it for a while. In addition, we have Temple of the False God. Temple of the False God, some people don't like this card. I think this card is great. It's a Soul Ring. It doesn't work early game, so it doesn't accelerate you as much as you want, unless, of course, you're accelerating yourself with other ramp spells. But once it's online, once you have just 4 other lands, I mean, a land that taps for 2, why wouldn't you run that? Why indeed. Then we have 3 soft fetches. Evolving Wilds and Riveteer's Overlook are both cards that can find any of our basics. Evolving Wilds we can hold on to and sack when we want. Riveteer's Overlook will sacrifice itself immediately, but it gains us a life. And we have Myriad Landscape to give us just a touch of ramp when we have our mana open. Sometimes that's going to be early, sometimes it's going to be late. We want to thin our deck. Seems good. We are running a pathway. I love the pathways, of course. Comes in, and it is whatever you need it to be. We're going to hit our colors specifically. And then we've got these 7 utility lands. And I think that's all. Yep, 7 utility lands. So I brought up Regenerate earlier. Accursed Duneyard is from the Aetherdrift Commander decks. It's a land that taps for colorless, but for 2 and tap, we can regenerate target Shade, Skeleton, Spectre, Spirit, Vampire, Wraith, or Zombie. I don't think we have any of that in here, except for Yargle and Multani, which is a Spirit. So, as I mentioned before, according to the flavor text, or the reminder text here, Regenerate means the next time our creature would be destroyed this turn, instead tap it, remove it from combat, and heal all the damage on it. So Accursed Duneyard it's a mana source, sure, but most importantly, for 3 mana every turn, or every one of our turns, or every turn cycle I should say, we're able to put a regeneration shield up on our commander. I think that's pretty good. Pretty good utility in a land. Bonder's Enclave, of course. I mean, it taps for colorless. We pay 3 and tap to draw a card if we control something with power 4 or greater. So if we hit our Ferocious, which we always do with our commander, this is an extra card every turn. Not a free one. Costs us tapping 4 mana sources, including this one. But if we need the extra cards, we've got access to it. Demolition Field is here because I like Demolition Field in my decks as a way of dealing with non-basic lands that can be a problem for us. It taps for colorless, and of course you can pay 2, tap it and sack it to blow up another non-basic land that one of your opponents controls. They can then rampant growth, and so can we. So we don't lose our land, we just turn it into a basic. That's important because people have cards like Glacial Chasm, which means they won't take damage from things. We need them to take damage if we want Yargle and Multani to kill them. So Demolition Field, and of course there's plenty of other lands that could be problematic. This is a good answer to them. Mosswort Bridge is a green source for us. It comes in, taps for green. It does come in tapped though, but when it comes in tapped, it has Hideaway 4. Hideaway 4 is, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile one face down, sort of under this card, and the others go on the bottom of your library. Then you can pay a green and tap it while you have creatures total power 10 or greater to play the card you exiled with it for free. So Mosswort Bridge is great because so many of our spells cost more than 1 green mana, or more than 2 mana, I should say, even though a lot of them do cost 2. Having an extra card in hand, essentially, that we can always use just for tapping green and this, so essentially 2 mana, to help out our commander, hard to say no to that. Plaza of Heroes is a little bit of an expensive card in this deck, but it's just so good. It's a land that taps for colorless, or 1 mana of any color we can only use on legendary spells, which we have a few of, but specifically our commander. Or when we have a legendary out, including our commander, we can tap it from mana of any color among those legendary permanents. So the Skullspore Nexus is out, it taps for green. Yargle and Multani is out, it's essentially a command tower. As well as, for 3 and tap and exile it, we can give a legendary creature hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is just another protection spell for our commander. Great. We are running Reliquary Tower to give us no maximum hand size for a couple of our big draw spells, just because that's a fun thing. It's not super efficient in this deck because it's not coming up that often, but the few times when we draw 18 cards off of Yargle and Multani, it's just going to be fun to be like, haha, I don't have to discard, I've got my Reliquary Tower. That's a good time. And then Rogue's Passage. All we need is a +3 pump to Yargle and Multani's power, and Rogue's Passage and 4 other mana sources mean our commander can't be blocked and our opponent has lost the game. So, that about sums it up. Again, I plan to make one of these videos for every March of the Machine legend. So let me know in the comments if you have a favorite you'd like to see or a particular way you'd like me to build it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Remember to like and subscribe, and most of all, remember that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.